Let's continue with דיני אסמכתא. We continue in סימן Zayin, סעיף Yud Daled. We're going to do today Yud Daled, Tezvav, and Tezayin, and then the next year is going to be, next week we'll go back to Vav and Zayin regarding Ribbus. In Sif Yud Daled, the Mechaber begins by saying that if we say Me'achshav, be koine from now, then it's Mevato, the Asmachtas, there's no Asmachta whatsoever. The סימן Sifkot Lamed Ches explains that the Stam Kinyan doesn't usually work for the Stam Kinyan usually is Me'achshav, but a Stam Kinyan in such a scenario wouldn't work, because if you say that you're going to be koine for later, then the Sudar was already given back by the time the Kinyan will actually kick in. That means down the line, when the Kinyan is going to be fulfilled, then the Sudar was already returned to the other person, so therefore the Kinyan is not going to have what to be chal on. Therefore you have to clearly say Me'achshav. This is something which we spoke about in the past in Shiurim, from the Tzemach etc. That's a Sifkot Lamed Ches. In Sifkot Lamed Zayin, the Tzemach explains that not only do you have to say Me'achshav, you have to say what is Nikna Me'achshav. A Kinyan is only chal on what's called the Dover Mesuyam, something which is specific. But to make a vague Kinyan doesn't really work. So unless you say that if I'm going to do kach v'kach, or I'm not going to do kach v'kach, then this house is going to be Nikna, by zeh, without a Dover Mesuyam, a specific thing that you're pointing, doesn't have to be pointing to with your finger, but something that you identify, without an identified object or property on which the Kinyan is going to be chal, then the Kinyan is not going to be chal. That is what the Tzemach explains on the Mechaber. The Ramah then comes and brings first the Yeshayimrim that say that it's not enough to just say Me'achshav. You also have to have a Kinyan in front of a Bezdin Choshev together with the Me'achshav. That's the first Yeshayimrim that Ramah says. Now, then the Ramah brings another Yeshayimrim. It's not chaylik on it, but the Ramah brings another Nekuda. The next point that he brings is Yeshayimrim that anybody who says Al Minas, it's the same as saying Me'achshav for the purpose of Asmachta. That means if you say B'tanai, it doesn't work. If you say Al Minas, it works just like Asmach, just like Me'achshav works with Mevatel a Asmachta. And on that he brings that Yesh Chalkim, some people disagree and say that if it's regarding a Knas, then Al Minas doesn't work instead of Me'achshav. That's pretty much the summary of Mechaber, and there are other points I'm going to be talking about. First points I'm going to be talking about now. Tzemach Tzedek is about 9 pages. We didn't finish talking about him. We spoke 2 shiurim, we spoke about Tzemach Tzedek, and today we're also going to be talking about Tzemach Tzedek. It's Asmachta. There's nothing to fall on it, yeah. But here's where the discussion is in the, if it's Asmachta derech Knas, and if it's, that's what also the Smes mentions over here, that if it's an Asmachta which is nothing to fall on, Tzemach Tzedek mentions it, Alter Rebbe mentions it, everybody mentions it. This is a general rule. Now, even though the Ramah says that when you need a Kinyan together with Me'achshav, a Kinyan b'fnei Bezdin Choshev together with Me'achshav Mevatel Asmachta, the Sifkot and Mem, the Tzemach explains that you don't really need that. A Kinyan in front of a Bezdin Choshev works even without saying Me'achshav, but Me'achshav doesn't work without doing it in front of a Bezdin Choshev. And why does the Tzemach say that? The Tzemach says that the Tzemach says unless you specifically say in front of a Bezdin Choshev that this Kinyan is not Me'achshav, it's automatically considered as a Me'achshav. That's how the Smer says. It says a stam kinyan bebezin choshev is automatically meyachshav, but a stam meyachshav doesn't really work unless it's in front of bezin choshev. That's what the Rama is trying to tell you. That meyachshav without bezin choshev doesn't work, but bezin choshev without meyachshav does work. Comes the Taz,
Because there's a presumptive meyachshav.
Yeah, comes the Taz and says, cannot say such a thing. You can't be moitzi momen misofik based on this logic to just say that based on the diuk of the smeh, you can't be moitzi momen misofik. You have a problem that the Rama doesn't mention the words meyachshav, only mentions bezdin choshev, and that's the diuk of the smeh. He says the Rama doesn't have to repeat what the Mechaber says. The Mechaber says meyachshav, and the Rama comes and says yeshayimrim, that you need it in front of a bezdin choshev. What's the it? The kinyan, the meyachshav has to be done with the kinyan in front of a bezdin choshev. But you can't say that the Rama disagrees with the concept of meyachshav and says that bezdin choshev replaces the meyachshav, and therefore you have to say meyachshav in front of a bezdin choshev. And if you don't, you can't be moitzi momen misofik according to that, especially since you have achreinim which disagree with the smeh, and they hold that you need both. That's machlekes Taz and Smeh, and essentially most people agree with the Taz or with the logic of the Taz in this specific nekuda. Now, in Chidush Rabbi Akiva Eiger on the side over here, he brings he says yesh mishakasav. There's somebody who writes essentially yesh ha'imrim that a shtar which has a time written on it is also like a meyachshav. It means if you're going to follow the logic that meyachshav is enough, or even if you're going to follow that the smeh, that a kinyan in front of bezdin choshev without meyachshav is also enough. If you have a shtar with a time on it, with a date on it, then that is considered, the time on it is already considered meyachshav. Now, we already know from the Tzemach Tzedek that if you don't specifically say meyachshav, it doesn't work. That we already know. So we're not going to, there's no such thing as stam when it comes to meyachshav, there's no such thing as stam when it comes to bezdin choshev. When it comes to canceling an asmechtah, everything has to be said, or at least written specifically, and all the klolim, stam kinyan, stam bezdin, stam shtar, all the stams don't apply when it comes to asmechtah. That's the logical. That's a svar of Tzemach Tzedek. But Rabbi Akiva Eiger brings that shit. Now, if you look in the Mishpat Shalom over here on this Ramah, he adds to this idea of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. He doesn't specifically quote Rabbi Akiva Eiger, but he adds on this idea. He brings the name of the Gedulei Truma, which is the source of it. That when do we say that a zman and a shtar is considered meyachshav? Is only when the shtar halachically does not require a zman. When for this to kick in, the shtar would not require a zman. But if the shtar inherently requires a zman, you can't use the zman for two things. Because then, what does it mean? If I have a shtar which requires a zman, then I can't be medayek anything from the zman. But if the shtar does not require a zman and I added a zman into it, that proves that the reason I added into it is because I specifically wanted it to be meyachshav. So it says if you said meyachshav, that's what brings the name of the Gedulei Truma. But otherwise, it doesn't work. So what Rabbi Akiva Eiger brings, he says it's limited. It's not every shtar that has zman, not every zman becomes meyachshav. It has to be an intentional zman to have an intentional meyachshav. Again, the same idea that there's no stam in asmachtas. Asmachta inherently doesn't work. If you want to undo an asmachta, you have to do something which shows that. Now, the Ramah, we mentioned that the Ramah says at the end of his words, that at the end of the last Yashemlim, the Asmachta, regarding a knas, the words al menas don't work. So the Smeh explains why is that. Because when does al menas work? When does al menas work? Al menas only works when Almanas instead of me'achshav. Almanas only works when there is a t'nai that the other person has to do. That means that almanas, that you'll give me kach v'kach amount of money. So then, whenever she pays the money, she's megureshes. Because almanas, that you should do something. But there's no such thing as almanas that I should do something. So mekabel b'derech knas, which is asmechtã b'derech knas, which means I'm mekabel upon myself that I'm going to do something. I'm going to pay a knas. What do you mean? You could until 400 years ago, Gittin had Tanaim, had conditions. Yeah, it wasn't halachically abolished, but it's already written in the Beis Yosef that it's already frowned upon to make a Tanai. Yeah, it creates complications. A woman is hanging between life and death, and you don't know what she's going to be. If she's going to be divorced or she's going to be married. So then came the trick that you're going to do a Tanai in Shluchas. I'm going off topic. You're going to be a Tanai because you asked about it. You're going to Tanai on Shluchas beget. So you're not making a Tanai on the get, you're not megureshes. You're making a Tanai for the Shliach. And the time of Tzemach was still valid. There's a tshuva of 21 oisius in the Tzemach Tzedek regarding Tanai in Shluchas aget. And if you read the tshuva, if you learn the tshuva, the way I understood it is Tzemach Tzedek is machmer. But the one who prepared the Tzemach Tzedek for print, Viderevich,
Machmer that it's what?
If even a suffix on the Tanai, you still have to. The shluchas is not chal. The get is not possible. It's not a child. Just the shluchas is not chal. Shluchas didn't work. But if you look, for whatever reason, Chaim Viderevich, the one who edited the first print of the Tzemach Tzedek, was also the first chief rabbi of America, according to a stationery, he edited it, and when the summaries, you have in the back the summary of every tshuva, he writes the summary in such a way that Tzemach Tzedek is meiko. But I don't know how he got to that understanding, but he was a greater rabbi, so. That's what it seems like from the way he understood Tzemach. Because Tzemach Tzedek is not machriya. Tzemach Tzedek goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and doesn't give you a clear psak at the end. So, but if you learn it in the way you see, if somebody brings and every time tries to be machmer, you see that it seems like Tzemach Tzedek wants to be machmer. Anyways, that's off topic. So almanas only works when it's on somebody else. Almanas on me doesn't work. That's what the Sma explains. That means almanas is on doing something, not on not doing something. It has to be almanas that somebody else is going to do something. Not almanas that, also almanas doesn't work for something which is preventative. Almanas means so it should be done. But if I'm taking upon myself a knas, almanas that I'm not going to do something, the almanas doesn't fit into the language. So therefore the almanas doesn't work to cancel out.
It's never really fulfilled because you're not doing it?
Yeah, and if you look in the Nesivis and Chidush and Sifkat Mem Daled, the way he explains it is that's how he paraphrases the Smeh, that the Knas, the idea is that you don't want something to be done. Right? Now to add to it, this Nesivis doesn't write this, but Almenas on a Knas is the exact opposite of Me'achshav. Why is that? Because Me'achshav means I'm acquiring something from now. If it's on something or for doing something, that I'm committing to doing something, and I'm committing from now, I'm going to do something, and something is going to happen. But to make a Me'achshav on something I'm not going to do is very hard, because when is it ever going to be Chal, the Me'achshav? Yeah? It's hard to say that. It's hard to say that Almanas and such a thing, yeah. Now, the Knesset Agdela and the Goy Satura Iskuf Yud Gimel brings a Marshach. Very simple thing. The word Me'achshav doesn't have to be the word Me'achshav. You don't have to say, like you read the phonetics. It doesn't have to say the word Me'achshav. If you say Me'ata also works. Whatever the word means Me'achshav, it also just the nusach makes no difference. Now, in Oiskuf Yudalad, he also brings the same Marshach, interesting thing. If I write a whole shtar and I don't mention Me'achshav, but towards the end, I just copied from another shtar, the regular Nusach. It says, Kol HaKinyonim, Me'achshav, if Nebezin Choshev, the regular shtar, it works. As long as the word Me'achshav is written once in the shtar. It doesn't have to be written in the description. Even if at the end, the last paragraph, you wrote the word Me'achshav and you didn't explain it before when you explained the whole thing, that's also works. In Oiskuf Yud Zayin, the Knesset Agdela goes into the opinion of the Rosh, which is what the Ramah follows, which is that it's not enough to just say Me'achshav, but you have to have a kinyan, Bezdin Chashuv, Me'achshav, the whole thing. Or is it enough to just have a Bezdin Chashuv without Me'achshav, like the Smeh says? And he's Medayek from the Rosh, that you can, there's the Yukim in the Rosh, the Knesset Agdela goes through and analyzes the Rosh and explains to you why you can be Medayek from the Rosh that you don't need Me'achshav, that you don't need Me'achshav in front of a Bezdin Chashuv. You can be Medayek from the Rosh that you do need to say Me'achshav in front of a Bezdin Chashuv. But the maskana is that you need all of them. That's his maskana. His maskana is, even though I can be Medayek from the Rosh, maybe like the Bach, that Bach and Smeh, that you don't have to specify Me'achshav for the Bezdin Chashuv, still he paskins that you have to. And then his grandson, the Matashimin, in the Goisatur Oispei, goes and takes apart the Knesset Agdela. But I'm not going to go into it now. If you want to enjoy a good family fight, you can look over there. Now, since we're talking about the Matashimin, and Goisatur Oisayin Zayin, the Matashimin brings from the Charles Tshuva Zera Avram, that when you say Me'achshav, it works for any kind of Asmechtã, even an eten. Because we know the kinyan on eten doesn't work. I'm going to give something. But if you say Me'achshav, it also works. That means not that you're making a sale with it, nothing. Me giving you something, I'm committing to giving you something, and I say Me'achshav, I'm going to do something, and I say Me'achshav, it also works. That's for Seif Yudalad. Let's move on to Seif Tezvav. Yeah, so that's why he says Kinyan Dvarim is even worse than Asmechtã. Asmechtã has something to land on. Right, but he brings from the Zera, the Zera Avram says that the Me'achshav works for any form of thing of such a thing. The only shaila is, which I didn't find the clear answer for, I do remember learning, I don't remember where, does it work for a Davar Shlei B'La'olam, which is even less, even the next level, for Davar Shlei B'La'olam. The Mechaber writes in Seif Tezvav, and this is where the Mechaber brings the Me'achshav, the Bezdin Chashuv. That every Asmechtã you made a kinyan in front of Bezdin Chashuv, it's not an Asmechtã. And the Mechaber doesn't mention the word Me'achshav. And the Ramah is not Magia, the word Me'achshav over here. It doesn't say, and that is the proof for the Smeh that we mentioned before, that according to the Ramah, you don't need to say Me'achshav or Bezdin Chashuv. Because if the Ramah would hold you have to say Me'achshav in front of Bezdin Chashuv, he would write it over here. He didn't.
They both be either or, it's fine.
Who's both? According to the Smeh, the Mechaber and the Ramah would agree on that. The Machlekes would only be Me'achshav without a Bezdin Chashuv. It's Machlekes Rambam and Rosh. So how to understand the Rosh? The Rambam is clear that Me'achshav works, and the Rambam is clear that Bezdin Chashuv works. And Machlekes is how to understand the Rosh, who says you have to do Me'achshav also. Then the Ramah explains, first of all, what's a Bezdin Chashuv? Bezdin Chashuv is three people who are baki in דיני Asmechtas. Next thing the Mechaber, the Ramah says, Yachid Mumche, who's obviously is baki in דיני Asmechtas. Yeshayimlim, that it also works for, if you make a kinyan in front of a Yachid Mumche, it works the same as a Bezdin Chashuv. Huh? Yeah. It's like in the beginning of Choshen Mishpat, yeah.
And that the Bezdin includes someone's Mumche?
No. At least that's how I understood it. Could be I'm wrong, but that's how I understood it. The third point that Rama says is, if you're mitzvah, which you already know from the Alter Rebbe, if you're mitzvah, if you tell them you have to write in the shtar, if you tell the Edom to write in the shtar that you made a kinyan in front of a bezdin chashuv, it works, and the Rama adds the words afal gav de loikana, even though you didn't loikana. There's no kinyan. He doesn't explain what. We know from the Alter Rebbe that you have to have a kinyan, you just don't have to have the kinyan in front of the bezdin chashuv. But the Rama doesn't explain one way or the other. You could be medayik. You could say Afa Pishalei Kana means Afa Pishalei Kana in front of the Bezdin Chashuv. You could say Afa Pishalei Kana even though you didn't make a kinyan, as long as you write it in the shtar, it works. But that's, we already know what the Alter Rebbe works in it. Now, yeah, and the Sivas Yud Ches goes into it, and he says, okay. Yeah, but the question is if me'achshav works. The Sivas only talks about the lashonis of the shtar.
It sounds like there's a concept of Gomer Hikman. If you Megal Das, it shouldn't be a problem.
It can't be Gomer Hikman, something which doesn't exist. It's not Gomer Das, something which doesn't exist. So yes, in the Sivas Gran and Sivkot Miches talks about Davar Shalai B'Layla. When he says, we know about shtar, that if you write in the shtar all the lashonis, it works. If you write in a shtar that you made a kinyan agav suda for a davar shalai b'laylam, it's not going to help you anything. Why? Because a kinyan agav suda doesn't work for davar shalai b'laylam. Yeah, so you have to write in the shtar something which, if it would happen, it would work. But writing in the shtar something which, if it would happen, it still wouldn't work, doesn't help you anything.
What's the get of davar shalai b'laylam?
Something which is not yet in existence and you have nothing to hang your hat on, essentially. Selling something which doesn't exist yet.
At all?
Yeah. Selling rainwater. Selling rainwater that didn't fall yet from the sky. In Colorado and California, there is such a concept, but people have water rights and all these things. But
What about air rights? Air rights?
Air rights is halachically. We learned it last year in Niskashchinim. Air rights works, and in Cheshabas and Cheserev, whoever I know, whoever was here then, or you could see. What does it mean? Doesn't mean that you build a building all the way to the sky. All the air on top of it's part of your Yachid. You continue, it's all yours. Okay, now the Rama then continues and says, even if you don't say what to write, you just tell the Edom, write me a shtar toiv. That's one version of the Rama. And in parentheses, shtar choiv. It's a big nafkamina la'alacha what it means. Yeah. Then it also works. The Edom will write whatever you need to write. Comes the Sman Sifkotim Mem Gimel. Here's the Machleka Sman Alter Rebbe. Sman writes in Sifkotim Mem Gimel that if you tell a person to write a stam shtar and you don't tell him what to write, the chayra would make sense that it should work, right? Seems like it should work. That's the mashmos of the halacha. Stam shtar. But the Rama then comes and says you have to say shtar toiv, a good shtar. So what does it mean? The Rama wants to tell you that you have to tell the Edom to write for you mehuder shtar, good shtar. What's a good shtar? That the shtar includes bezdin chashuv in it. Why? Because the bifnei bezdin chashuv is not the standard nusach of a shtar. That's what the Smeh says, and therefore the Rama wanted to clarify to you that if you tell the Edom to write stam shtar, it doesn't work enough. You have to tell the Edom to write shtar toiv. Then it works. Why? Just like in Siman, where is it? In Siman Samach Aleph. Regarding the Amanas and Bitul Meidos, it's not enough, at least the way the Smeh understands the Rama over there, it's not enough to just tell the Edom to write a shtar, but you have to tell them specifically about Ne'emanos, that who's trusted in such a scenario, and Bitul Midas, you have to say it, it's not enough to just say, write me a shtar. So here also, when it comes to Bifnei Bezdin Choshev, you have to specify to them shtar toiv, and then it works. But he's...
You have to write the details of the...
Yeah, you have to write Bifnei Bezdin Choshev and everything else, yeah. Comes out to that, and the Smer remains in Tzarech Yun, if Taka you need to, if a stam shtar works or not. Comes out to that when Hilchas Edu Sif Yud Beis. Right, we already know that. That if you tell the Eidim, write me a shtar, and you don't say anything else, then the Eidim write whatever Lashonos are common in that town. Bein Shehem Lashonos HaMa'ilim BeAsmechtא, whether they are Lashonos which work for Asmechtא, Ben HaMa'ilim LeNe'emanos, or whatever Lashonos are for Ne'emanos. So right from the Pnim of the Alter Rebbe, you see this agrees with the Smeh. Because the Smeh writes that Ne'emanos has to be specified, and it's not included in the Stam Shtar. So first, we already see. Comes Alter Rebbe in Kunter Sachren over there, it's a short Kunter Sachren, about 2 lines, 3 lines, whatever, 2 lines. Else in Hilchas Eidos over there, the first Kunter Sachren of Hilchas Eidos. He says about what the Smer writes over here in Sif Katan Mem Gimel Tzarech Yun Gadol. And then he says, Bichlal, we have a girsa that the word toiv is not there. It's not shtar toiv. Yeah, that's not what it's not what it says. There are some girsas like that. There says a kisvuli shtar, which obviously means stam. If you look in our books, I told you there's in parentheses over there shtar choiv, not toiv. So again, the word toiv is not there. And he says, obviously, it's probably the Smeh is following L'Shitasei. What's L'Shitasei? The way he explains in Siman Samach Aleph, Sifkat Yud Aleph, because over there, what does the Ramah say in Siman Samach Aleph? That the Stam Shtar doesn't work for Ne'emanos Alim Kempirish, unless you express it, unless you specify it. What does the Smeh understand from it in Sifkat Yud Aleph and Siman Samach Aleph, not here? That Pirish is on the person. That Elohim came Pirish, unless a person was mefarish, put Ne'emanos down, you can't write it into the shtar. You have to be mefarish, kol shtar with all this chusim and everything that's there, and everything that belongs in there. Because, and you have to specify Ne'emanos, and he says, because when I tell you that write for me a shtar with the best words, and I don't specify to you what's the best things that I want in the shtar, then it's only for the standard stuff, not for any special orders. So Ne'emanos, when it comes to Ne'emanos, when it comes to Bezdin Choshev, all these things are bonuses that you have to specify. That's how the Sman understands it. Over there also. And the Alter Rebbe says, but look at the Shach in Siman Samach Aleph over there, and you'll see that the Shach says that the Smer got it wrong. Shach in Sefkot and Ches disagrees with the Smer. And the Shach says that it's not so. And when a person says, give me a shtar with all the benefits, it does include Ne'emanos. So being that the Smer based his reasoning over here that you have to specify Bezdin Choshev, to understand the Ramah, based on his understanding in the Ramah in Siman Samach Aleph, and in Siman Samach Aleph, the Alter Rebbe says Tzarech Yun Gadol here, because in Tzarech Yun Gadol over there, because the Shach disagrees with him over there. So therefore, it's still included. And then the Alter Rebbe continues and says, Bichlal, if you look in the Ritva, which is, I think, the source of the Ramah, what's Elohim Ken Pirish? It's clearly Elohim Ken Pirish B'shtar. Doesn't mean that the person has to be mefarish to the Eidim what to write. Elohim Ken Pirish means Elohim Ken Pirish B'shtar. That you don't say a stam shtar includes things that are not written in the shtar. Includes the Ne'emanos and everything else. It has to be only if it's mefurish in the shtar.
How can you write something if it didn't happen?
If what?
You didn't go to base in the Choshen.
How does it work?
Why?
Because why does the concept of it works?
Yeah.
Because if for whatever a moida, we went through this in the past.
But you can't be moida. It's not considered like a mezuzah for Torah.
No, because what's the reason why Asmechtã is not koine? There's no gemilas das. If I sign a shtar which has lashonos, which I know mean gemilas das, so then it works. That means it's not that the shtar is a lie. It's that by me signing on a piece of paper, which implies gemilas das, means I had gemilas das. Kamar v'hikna. So there's no Asmechtã. That's how I understand the Alter Rebbe. Now, if you look in the Knesset Agdela, goes Beis Yosef Ois Reish Daled, he also pretty much like the Alter Rebbe. That anytime you say that if you say to write a shtar, it's enough, and the Eidim should write Bezdin Chashuv, unless he specifically tells the Eidim, do not write the words Bezdin Chashuv. Otherwise, whenever a shtar is being ordered, whenever you ask somebody to write a shtar, you should have the words B'fnei Bezdin Chashuv. Now, the Knesset Agdela adds, it's all Medaita, usually Knesset Agdela quotes other people, over here it's all Nichtav B'tzidai, his own thing, that if the person never asked them to write a shtar, rather, what did he tell them? Nothing. They saw the kinyan, and a good aide, professional aide, knows that when you see a kinyan, you're supposed to write a shtar. So now he takes it a step further. He says, oh, I'm anyways writing a shtar for the kinyan. Let me stick in all the words that we usually stick in over here. Bezdin Chashuv, like Asmechtã, all the things that the Tefsir Shtare, with the kinyan Gamor, and everything. He says, that's not enough. That doesn't work. Even though we know Stam Kinyan L'Ksiva, the usual Kinyan is supposed to be written down, you can't take it so far and say that if he doesn't ask you, you can add all the Lashonos in. If you saw a Kinyan, write what you saw. Don't stick in extra words. If he tells you, write me a shtar, it means he has in mind everything.
If I tell you to write a shtar and you know it's an Asmechtã, you should write it anyways?
If what?
If I tell you to write a shtar and you know it's an Asmechtã,
So I'm going to stick everything in.
I'm saying according to the Smeh, or according to the...
According to the Smeh, if you don't tell me if Bezdin Chashuv, it's Tzarechiyun. If it works or not, according to the Ramah. According to Alter Rebbe, clearly works. Clearly you have to put it in.
What if I tell you don't write Bezdin Chashuv?
That's according to everybody, doesn't work.
But I'm saying, should you write a shtar on Asmechtã? That's what I'm asking.
Why not? I'm getting paid to write the shtar, write the shtar. It's not my problem. I'm following orders. I'm not writing something which is a lie.
You get problems with ribs. Because you can't be eating ribs.
Asmechtã not always is ribis.
You make problems with ribs.
Cool, you have to know what you're doing. You should be careful how you write it. You have to tell the guy you can't collect the fruits that belong to the other guy, whatever. That's a Sifov and Zayin. The Knesset Agdela concludes, therefore, if you see a shtar that doesn't have the words Naisa B'fnei Bezdin Chashuv, the Bezdin has to be choker. Why is it not there? Is it because the Eidim weren't told to write a kinyan, weren't told to write a shtar, or the Eidim were told to write a shtar which doesn't include it? Because a standard shtar should have it. And if it's not there, it's Ma'ile Chashash. Now, this is all regarding the Ramah. Comes a Mechaber and says that when does a kinyan in front of the Bezdin Chashuv works? Only by Hitpis Schuyosav Bezdin, that he gave over his rights to Bezdin. They should be toifas the rights on his behalf, and then they can make a kinyan from the Bezdin Chashuv. Explains the Gra in short, because the reason I'm telling it to you is because Tzemach expands not on the Gra, on the concept which is also mentioned here, but at least you have it on the page. That it's dafka. Why? That you have to do because since the whole logic according to the Mechaber is that you need that bifnei Bezdin Chashuv is midin, hefker Bezdin, hefker afkas Bezdin, etc. So you have the Bezdin has to have it to be able to do it, and therefore he also says you don't need miachshav according to the Mechaber. Because once it's in the hands of Bezdin, you don't have to say Miachshav, because it's not something which happens later. You already gave it to Bezdin now. And Bezdin, it's at their koyach. They can do whatever they want, but for that, they have to have it in their hands. And if you don't have a Tfisas Bezdin according to the Mechaber, you could have Bezdin Choshev and it's Leimayla v'Leimaylit. Because if Bezdin,
You don't have to see what
according to the Mechaber,
What do you mean? Tfisa is based on what do you mean?
that you give over the rights to Bezdin. You give over your rights to Bezdin. So it's not that when I make a kinyan with you, B'fnei Bezdin Choshev, it's not that I am still retaining my rights to this object. I'm giving Bezdin the rights. And then Bezdin can be mafkia it. It's a mushlush in Bezdin. And therefore Bezdin can be mafkia it. And the Ramah disagrees with the Mechaber and says, you don't have to do Yatfis Schuyoisav Bezdin. It's enough as long as a kinyan from Bezdin Choshev, it works. Also Machlekes Rambam and Rosh. The Mechaber holds like the Rambam and the Rambam holds like the Rosh. And what's the Machlekes? You have to do Lahat Pis Schuyoisav or not. There's a nice Tzemach Tzedek in the Piskei Dinim. It's page 194 in your spirals. Dibra Maschel Tur Seif Yutes. I'm just going to, it's short. I'm summarizing one small part out of it. I'm summarizing it in short, but you can look at it afterwards if you're interested. He says very simply, we already know. Why? Because why does the Rambam say that Matpis, page 194, Dibra Maschel Tur Seif Yutes? Why does the Rambam say that you have to be matpis chuyoisav bebezdin? Because the Rambam holds, first of all, You want to get it? First of all, the Rambam holds hefker bezdin, hefker. When it's talking about something which is a shaila nedeiraisa, hefker bezdin, hefker only works lehachzik but not lehoitzi. That means bezdin could have the koyach to prevent you from giving something, to prevent you from losing ownership. But Bezdin doesn't have the koyach, mideiraisa, to take something away from you, mikoyach hefker Bezdin hefker. So therefore, being that the Tur holds in Shittas Rambam that a kinyan in front of a Bezdin chashuv is mitzad hefker Bezdin hefker, and hefker bezdin hefker, according to the Rambam, only works lahachzik and not lahoitzi. So therefore, according to the Rambam, you must have lahat f'schiyos of bezdin. Because if you're not going to give it to bezdin, they're not going to be able to do anything with it. The kinyan bezdin chosh is not going to help anything. Because it's not going to be lahach, it's going to be lahoitzi, not lahachzik. Mashenkin, once bezdin already holds it, has power over it, then it's no longer lahoitzi.
Not connected, but so when we say after Eagle according to the Rambam by condition, it means that it returns to his chazaka.
Afkinu, the whole kiddushin is midrabanan.
I mean,
That's the whole logic of Afkinu.
That's what I do.
So it's because we call them Mekadosh the Rabbanan. Mekadosh is the Rabbanan. Also we're Mafkir, the kiddushin. Afkinu Rabbanan to the kiddushin, the Rabbanan, the Dadat the Rabbanan. Now comes the Tzemach Tzedek and says, according to the Rambam, if I'm mashlish a shtar, and then I'm giving the shtar over to the other person, by Asmekhtã, the previous case that we discussed about. Mashlish a shtar, the whole discussion over there, the Rambam holds it's like Moitzi Mammon, that you're being Moitzi Mammon from the Muchzak. So how does it work over here to say that the Rambam doesn't hold of it? So how does it work over here? So he says, when the Rambam was talking about a shtar, that you're moitzi mammon according to the shtar, it's only, not moitzi, that when you give a shtar and you transfer a shtar, it's moitzi mammon, is when the whole discussion is on the validity of the shtar by itself. And therefore, when you're going to make a decision, one way or the other, you're being moitzi mammon. You have hefker bezdin lahoitzi mammon. But over here, what's the discussion? It's not about the money that's owed. It's about the physical piece of paper that's called a shtar. And the whole discussion is it an asmachta or is it not an asmachta? And therefore, does the star go here or the piece of paper goes to the right or the piece of paper goes to the left? So since you're not being moitzi moment, you're only being moitzi a piece of paper. So being moitzi a piece of paper, even though it's a dover should go in the moment, it's not going to go into it's something which is going to cause money. It's still not included in the concept that you're being moitzi moment mikoyach of course hefker bezdin, of course bezdin. Then he says that according to the Rosh, which agrees with the Rambam, hefker bezdin hefker also works lahoitzi even by deraisa, and therefore you don't need to be matpes chayosev bezdin. And then the Atzmechtzedek continues and says, Allah has kama v'kama according to the people which don't agree with the Torah's logic. And they don't say that the reason for Bezdin Chashuv is Midin, Hefker, Bezdin, Hefker. It's a different reason. So according to them, you don't need this whole discussion. For sure, you don't need this discussion of why the Rosh is Mata. And then Atzmechtzedek says, and he concludes and says, and don't you think that the Rosh holds that Asmachta is not koine even that the Asmachta is koine mideraisa. What does it mean? Because you could also explain the Rosh in a different way. That being that Asmachta mideraisa is koine, so therefore the same mideraisa you don't need to be matvis chuyosa because you're not the Bezdin is not doing anything. Mideraisa. Mideraisa Asmachta kanya. Mideraisa hefker Bezdin hefker. Even if you hold it's lahoitzi, that doesn't work lahoitzi. You don't need it. You're not being moitzi anything because midiraisa he was kind of. It's only midirabana. All right. So he says, don't think that it's that he holds that asmachta midiraisa is kind. Why? And he says because the Rosh who had to take apart there's a whole discussion over there. The Rosh was being poirech the Rif and the Rambam regarding Rebbe's K'tzutza in the previous Seifim. And I'm not going to get into it now, but Tzemach says the fact that the Rosh had to go and take apart the Rif and the Rambam over there is because he clearly does not hold that Asmachta is koine mideraisa. So therefore, that's not a good teretz. The terutzim that he says either because he holds a hefker bez and hefker mideraisa, it does work lahoitzi, or he doesn't hold that the hefker that bez and choshev is midin hefker bez and hefker. If you look in the Mishpat Shalom over here, the Mishpat Shalom brings, in the name of the Maranach, Maimamukim, that even though the Ramah says that you don't need to be matpis schuyos of a bezdin, it's hard to be moitzi mammon according to the Ramah. It means if a person was not matpis schuyos of a bezdin, are you going to be moitzi mammon based on that or not? And he says that on understanding the Ramah. So the Mishpat Shalom says Sarechim to follow him because the Ramah clearly seems to imply that you do follow this idea. And then the Mishpat Shalom concludes in the name of the Sefer Zechayel Avram that whoever is the Muchzah could say Kimli like everything. Could say Kimli that you should have said Me'achshav. Kimli, you also should have had a kinyan. Kimli, you also should have had the kinyan Me'achshav in front of Bez and Chashav. And Kimli, that you should have had the kinyan in front by saying Me'achshav in front of a Bez and Chashav and being matpes chiyes of a Bez, and if you're not, you lose out. And the Mishpat Shalom says on that also, Tzarech. Now, the end of the Ramah brings an interesting Yeshayimrim, that if they were mashlish mashkoines zeh keneged zeh, one person against the other, it's in the end of Seif Tesvav. Yeah, and over there he says if you're mashlish mashkoines zeh keneged zeh, and they wrote a shtar in according to the Goyisha laws and according to the Goyisha language, it works even to be mevatel da asmachta mitzad dina de malchus adina, and he says it's based on the Rashba. This Rashba is burned the Bes Yosef in Siman Samaches. The Mishpat Shalom goes and takes this Ramah apart. But first he says, let's look at the Rashba. The Ramadach brings the Rashba. He says, you look at the Rashba, what was the story of the Rashba? Those two people who got into a fight over some construction project. They had an agreement between them that they're going to follow what the umonim, the professionals in town, say. They're going to go for arbitration in front of the professionals. The professionals are going. Also, they were mekabel upon themselves a chiyuv of a knas in a shtar, which was written in Goyish language, not in Lashon Kodesh, that whoever is not going to fulfill his obligations is accepting upon himself a knas. And what is the knas? A financial knas, from which half is going to be paid towards city construction and half is going to be given to the other partner. And they also gave mashkins, each one gave a mashkin towards his obligation to these goyim, these umanim. And there was a fight, and they went to these goyim for a psak, and the goyim gave a psak, and one of them doesn't want to listen to the psak. And they came in front of the Rav. He's claiming asmechtã. Says the Rashba, it's not an asmechtã for three reasons. Reason number one, you were toile in dasa umanim, you accepted by yourself dasa umnim. And yesh omrim that asmechtã is only toile b'das atzmai. If I'm going to do something, that's asmechtã. If toile b'das achirim, some people say that it's not an asmechtã. So that's first reason. First sniff, to say it's not an asmechtã. Second sniff, it's not an asmechtã, since you gave a mashkin in the hands of the umnim, these goyim professionals, from this line of work. And you made a tanai that if you're going to violate it, part of the knas is going to go to building the city. And you knew at that time that you're not going to be able to avoid paying the knas to the city, because that's clearly written. And the city is not going to accept your terutzim of asmechtã. You committed, you're going to pay it. So that means by you was gomer vehikna 100%, that if you're not going to do it, it's gomer vehikna to the city, the knas, half of the knas. So the only question goes in the other half. The Rashba says one dibur cannot be split into two. You can't say that when I accept upon myself $1,000 knas, from which 500 will go to here and 500 will go to there, I understood that the first half is not asmechtã and the second half is asmechtã. That doesn't fly. You can't split into two. That's the second reason. Third reason, being that when they said it mechatchila, they said it meyachshav, it's mevatel asmechtã. But what does it mean? What does it mean they said meyachshav? They didn't say meyachshav. They wrote a shtar, and every shtar is like a meyachshav. Comes to Chashayla, the shtar was written in front of goyim, for goyim, accepting goyim, in the language of goyim. You want to go now and say that a shtar, which is a stam shtar by erkois, already is considered me'achshav? That doesn't fly. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. How was the other person zeiche? There was no kinyan with this shtar. So the Rashba says that shouldn't work. The Rashba says no. Being that everything, all the tanayim and the obligations, everything that was written in the shtar did end up working out. So then, because according to the Dina de Malchusa, you wrote it according to the Malchusa, and you accepted Dina de Malchusa, so it does work. That's the Rashba. He gives you three angles. It's kosher mitzad Dina de Malchusa. That's how it seems from the Rama. So he says, but it's not what the Rashba writes. That's the first thing. He's going to get into the Rashba soon. And the first point he wants to say is that some people hold. Who's the some people that hold that even by me'achshav alone there's an asmechtã? The Rama himself. By me'achshav by itself, without bezin choshev, there's still an asmechtã. Not the Rambam. The Rambam holds that the me'achshav by itself works. To mevatel asmechtã. Huh? Yeah, but who says that it doesn't work? The Rama. Doesn't work. The Rama. So Mishpat Shalom says, according to the Yeshem, the Rama brings before, that me'achshav by itself doesn't work. So now you're going and you're saying a shtar is like a me'achshav, and b'fnei bezdin, b'fnei goyim, and it works. So according to the Rama, it wouldn't work because it's still a suffix of a. It's a suffix if you can say din the machus din in such a case or not. So he says no. What's the logic of din the machus din according to the Rama? We must say it's because, being that in din the machus din asmechtã is koine, which we all know because we discussed from Alter Rebbe in the Chus Pesach, and you were mashlish the mashkoines by the goyim, means you accepted their jurisdiction. It became a kinyan. You gave it to them that they should make a decision according to their din of the machuzah. So that is the kinyan, not the shtar. That is the kinyan. That's one way of doing it. So he says that you want to say that it's all based on din of the machuzah din holding that asmechtã works. You have a problem. What's the problem? Also, we discussed this in previous shiurim. Machlekas Ramon Shach. If din the machuzah din applies against din Torah or not. According to Torah, asmechtã is not koine. And therefore, if you have din the machuzah din against halacha, machlekas if it works or not. So he says no. Maybe Mishpat Shalom says, okay, let's take a different angle. According to din the machuzah din, asmechtã is koine, right? So therefore, when you write a shtar according to the Goyish courts, knowing that din the machuzah din is koine by them, so you understand that that's a possibility, that's good, that's something which according to them is valid. So you sign the shtar according to the New York State law, or whatever country, the German law, that din the machuzah din, that it's right. So that it's asmechtã is koine. Shalochein, you're gomer vehikna. So there's no shaila of asmechtã. So there was gomer vehikna, and it's not against Torah. Once it's gomer vehikna by asmechtã, it's not against Torah. If it's not against Torah, then the machuzah din works. So then, say according to the Shach, say according to the Rama, it would work. So he says, no, can't say that. Why not? A frum yid goes with another yid to Bezdin. So I signed a paper that's going to go according to New York State law. But I expected it to go in front of a Bezdin. I knew if I'm going to get into a fight, I'm going to go in front of a Bezdin. And when I'm going to go in front of the Bezdin, what am I going to say? That din of the machuzah din doesn't apply when it's against Torah. So when I wrote according to New York State law, I only had in mind all the New York State laws which don't disagree with Torah. And this is an asmechtã which does disagree with Torah. So therefore I was never gomer vehikna. So therefore, if I was never gomer vehikna, so it's against Torah, so there's no din of the machuzah din. And asmechtã is not koine. So therefore he says, the only way out of it is to say that Rama quoted the Rashba, that Rama didn't invent it himself. He quotes the Rashba. And if he quotes the Rashba, you have to follow what the Rashba says. And you have to look inside the Rashba. You can't rely on the Rama himself. The Rama quoting the Rashba, it's a kitzur. Yeah, it's not, I'm paraphrasing the Mishpat Shalom, but the idea is the Rama didn't bring you the full Rashba. Go open up the Rashba, look at it, and you'll see that it's not initially pashut. You could just take a one-liner out of the Rashba, or as I'm saying, make a bumper sticker out of it, and just say, Azoi, nicht anders.
Why there is different? The fact that a guy has no asmechtã is accepted.
What does the Dark Mishnah bring?
Asmechtã to a goy. Here's two yidden.
I'm saying asmechtã to a guy is
It's a whole different argument if it's asmechtã to a goy. Here we're talking about two yidden, and they're relying on goy shadinim.
yeah.
By a goy, it's a shaila, which one's better schus for the yid. So he says from the Rashba, it's clear you need all three terutzim together. And it's clear, he's clear from the Rashba that one alone doesn't work. So therefore he says, Hadin baruch k'mo shekosafti, that you have to follow the Rashba on all three. You can't just you can't cherry pick one out of the three. It has to be mashkoines, and it has to be kimat noim, and it has to be with everything together, and that it's only a half asmechtã, not a full asmechtã, because half of the money went to eknas. Everything, when you have the whole package, then you could say the machuzah din and such a thing. And then he says, well, I have one more angle to maybe save the Rama of this problem. That maybe the Rama held that it's based on the hashlosha, not on anything else. Being that you were mashloshet by bidei akum, for the purpose of it being according to mishpat akum, Then he says, but then I don't like the teretz and tzarich. Comes the Erech Shai and says, I don't understand why the Mishpat Shalom is so complicated with the Ramah. The Ramah has his own shit, and other people have a different shit. The Ramah holds bepashtus that when you're mashlish something in the hands of a goy to make a decision, you accept that they should follow their decision. And their decision is asmachta kanya, and that's it. You don't have to go through the whole thing. Just take it simply, forget about all the questions. You gave it to them, you accepted their din, you knew what their din is, you knew asmachta kanya, means you understood that this is how, and not mitzad you're mekabel asmachta. You're mekabel to be done according to their dinim. And therefore, the Erech Shai says, and we know, what the Tumim writes in Siman Chavav. Siman Chavav is the Siman about Erkoes. And over there he brings in the Marik and Mari Bar Peretz, that if you're mekabel upon yourself to be done b'kedinei ya'akum or b'dinei ya'akum, it works. But he says, but that's only the way the Tumim brings the name of the Marik. But the Tumim himself doesn't like it. And the Tumim himself says, casts a question, even if you're mekabel such a thing, you could be chayzer, because maybe it's an asmachta. That's what he asks over there. So, and the Tumim says over there, why can't you be chayzer? Because you wrote a shtar, and when you wrote a shtar, to go according to their dinim, according to the New York State law, then the shtar is like a kinyan, and therefore you can't retract your agreement to follow New York State law. So, but that's when you have a clear shtar, what you're going to do. But over here, when it's daimela asmachta or it's mamish and asmachta, that according to the Rambam, a shtar doesn't work to be mafki and asmachta. So therefore, if a shtar doesn't work to be mekabel and asmachta, then according to Tumim, the only reason why you could be mekabel in the mechuzin is because of a shtar. So if a shtar doesn't work, then the lachas kam mekabel, then the mechuzin doesn't work. To be mekabel, then the mechuzin doesn't work, even with a shtar, according to the Tumim. So Tumim disagrees with the Ramah. So the Ramah has his own shittah, and the Tumim doesn't agree with him. So basically, he's trying to tell the Mishpat Shalom, it's fine that the Ramah is not the only person, and a lot of people disagree with him, including the Tumim. Comes the Ramah, and then he says, even though the Ramah holds that by a pshare, when you have a pshare, you want to be mekabel upon yourself a pshare, you need a shtar. By a pshare. You mekabel upon yourself if someone's going to make a pshare for you, Siman Yud Beis, you need a shtar. Because why? And the shtar is enough, because it's like a kinyan, you don't need the kinyan mamish. He says the Tumim disagrees with him. The Tumim holds over there also that a shtar is not enough. You need to have a kinyan gamul for a pshare. Why? Because a pshara is totally b'das acherim. You're waiting for the dayan and pashronim to make a pshara for you. So it's like an asmachta, so you need a full shtar. So therefore, yes, the Tumim disagrees, and it seems like the Erech Shai says we follow the Tumim. Comes out that from this side, from the Erech Shai and side from the Mishpat Shalom, that even if you accept upon yourself, not like that, even if you accept upon yourself דיני ya'akum, that asmachta is kind and דיני ya'akum, it's not going to work. In the next Seif Tazayin, the Mechaber goes into something which is known as Knas or Takonas Chachmei Sfard. What's the Takonas Chachmei Sfard? He says, how would they avoid asmachtas? He says that because when you have an asmachta which requires a kinyan to undo the asmachta, Chachmei Sfard came up with this trick. First, Reuven makes a kinyan with Shimon. I'm going to see all the details of the kinyan soon. And what's the kinyan? I owe you $100. That's it. That's the first kinyan. It's not saying anything else. Shimon then comes and says, makes a new kinyan towards Reuven. And the kinyan is, as long as kach v'kach is done, or kach v'kach is not done. Whatever you're going to do. This choiv is not collectible. And it's machul me'achshav. But if you're going to violate it, then the choiv becomes due. Hold on one second. Then the choiv becomes due. And the Ramah says that this idea works for any kind of topic, and he says, yesh mekaymes, that the minig is to write two shtaris. It means not just to do two kinyanim, but to write two shtaris. And you give the shtaris to the shalish. And then the Mechaber also says, that's how they do in Bittul Shidduch. I'm not going to get into the Bittul Shidduch now. I don't have enough time for it. The Smeh explains why you need two kinyanim. He says, why do you need two kinyanim or two shtaris? And then the Smeh only explains shtaris. He says the reason you need two shtaris is like why it's not enough to have one shtar for these two kinyanim, according to the Ramah. Very simple. If you have a shtar which says, Pliny did a kinyan to this and this guy to do kach v'kach, to give him $100. Then Pliny did a kinyan fakert to do kach v'kach. And they sign it, and it's all in the same shtar, the ptur and the chiyuv, then the shtar itself is an asmechtah. The shtar tells you the two sides of it. So it's an asmechtah. So you're signing a shtar on an asmechtah. So it doesn't work. Therefore you have to have two separate shtaris. And therefore you also have to have a shloshi. You can't have it by somebody else. But this is what he says. That's how he explains it. Nesivis, very nice Nesivis and Biaorim Sivkot Niyutes. It's long and has a bunch of little details in it about this, according to two shtaris. First point he says, when you give one shtar to the other, when Reuven gives the first shtar to Shimon, he has to give it without any tanoim. He has to, when he writes the shtar, he writes the shtar without any tanoim for the $100, for the $100 obligation. And he gives it to Shimon. He gives him a shtar in his hands, which says, I owe you $100. Shimon takes that shtar, and he is mashal shit in the hands of the shalish. We're soon going to see why. And when he's mashal shit in the hands of the shalish, he does say it tonight, when he's mashal shit. Then Shimon goes and he makes the second shtar with his snai. And then he gives the shtar to Reuven. And Reuven is then mashal shit by the shalish. And it's not enough to just not say a tanai, the Nesiva says. You have to clearly say this is without a tanai. Reuven, when he says the 100, has to clearly say, this is, I owe you $100, no strings attached. So now, why does it have to go that you first give it, each one gives the shtar to the opposite person, and then that person's mashal shit in the hands of the shalish? He says, because if not, who's the shalish holding the shtar for? For the one who gave it to him, not for the one who's supposed to get it. So therefore, if Reuven gives a shtar that says, I owe Shimon $100, and he gives a shtar to the shalish has no right to give it to Shimon. So therefore, he has to give it first to Shimon, and Shimon, who's already the owner of the shtar, is mashashit by Reuven with it now. And if not, when you give it, you have to say, Zchei b'shtar zeh, be zoiche for this and this person. Then the Nesivis goes on another point. This is first conditions in this shtar. We're going to get to some more soon. Then it goes on a side topic. Knas Chachmei Sfard, this Takan Chachmei Sfard, what does Reuven obligates himself to pay $100 to Shimon without any conditions? What happens if there's a oinus? You can't be Mekayim the Tanai. You have two separate transactions. The $100 choiv without a single condition. Therefore, I don't care about oinus. You owe me the money. Since when does oinus waive a debt? Oinus doesn't waive a debt. A debt is a debt. The oinus is on the Tanai, which is the second transaction, nothing to do with the first transaction. And he says, maybe it's not Nishtazei Pashat. Why? He says, oinus rachmana patre. but not oines rachmana chayve, which we already know from the Nesivos from before. Therefore, the fact that there's the oines is not enough for you to be obligated to pay money. The oines is enough to be paid to you. Or, you could say it differently, being that everybody knows that this knas chach misfat was made only to mafkia and asmechtã. Therefore, rachmana patre to who? The other person. But he says, but the Mishnah Melech doesn't hold that guy. He says after this, on the Mishnah Melech, that you chayev by takanas chach misfat even if you're nanas. But the fact is, he brings that only after he brings his own view, and he explains why it's not. Then the Nesivos continues another point. What happens? There's a Rav who's a Oiber Chacham. He tells Reuven, you're going to be now, this is Seder Hayoim, this is the order of the day. Show up in Bezin at 9 a.m. First, you're going to be Mischayev with Haranit Noim to Reuven, to Shimon. Then we're going to write a shtar. Then you're going to give it to Shimon. Then Shimon's going to give it to the Shalosh with it tonight. And then Shimon's going to write you a shtar and give it to you, and you're going to give it to the Shalosh. And he gives him the whole rundown before he starts it. He says that doesn't work anymore. Why? Because once you know everything is going to happen, in your mind the kinyan is already done out tonight. You say it's not out tonight. It was done out tonight. That's the last point in this that I'm bringing from the Nesivos. Now, just another point in this. Huh?
Why can't they start that to put this whole doing
because they wanted to ensure you don't have to chase. Probably you don't have to chase the guy for it. It was made for tzavos. It was made for chasnas. It was made for a bunch of other things like that, to prevent, to make it a stronger cancellation of asmachtas. Now he says the Smeh, he just points out, he says the Smeh, if you look in the Smeh explains why you need two shtaros according to the Ramah. But the Smeh doesn't tell you why you need two kinyonim according to the Mechaber. So Nesivos tells you, so if you're stuck trying to figure out why you need two kinyonim according to the Mechaber, look in the Taz. Just points to you, says, here, just take a look at the Taz. What does the Taz say? That the reason you need two kinyonim is because because over here it's a mechila. The first one, you're giving him a choiv that you don't owe him. So it's medin mechila. But being that it's all done with a purpose down the line, so it's a mechila she'eino brura. It's a mechila which is not a clear-cut, full-fledged mechila. And even though mechila doesn't need a kinyan usually, a mechila which is not a clear mechila requires an independent kinyan. So therefore, the first element of it requires a kinyan, independent kinyan, because it's a mechila. And the second one, when he's saying if you can do kach v'kach or kach v'kach, amoichel me'achshav, it's also not a clear mechila. So therefore, that one also needs a kinyan. With that, we conclude. Next year is going to be in Sifrim Vav and Zayin, and going to Hilchas Ribis.